point of eating vegetables.
Remember that you do not need to earn food.
We are all incorrectly taught from a young age that our size, and therefore the foods that we eat, are markers of our self-worth. Moralizing food can lead to harmful relationships with food and disordered eating.
Instead of focusing on good and bad choices, try to approach food with neutrality in mind.
The only foods that are bad for you are foods that contain allergens, poisons, and contaminants, or food that is spoiled or is otherwise inedible.
Eat without guilt, regardless of what society says.
Okay, so you see that nutritionist there. Well, it turns out that she's actually working with Mondelez, one of the world's biggest snack food manufacturers. And this is very much like we saw with the doctors who used to come out for cigarettes, talking about healthy cigarettes, who were paid to do studies by the tobacco companies. This whole thing has been dressing up an agenda that very often is directly financed by food companies to dress up a very unhealthy lifestyle in the language of social justice. I mean, really, I think it's a crime to have told people who are at risk of death and disease, no, you can be healthy that way. Just absolutely horrible. So you want to say, oh, well, what RFK is saying is dangerous, it's crazy. Well, is it compared to what you've been telling people? Even if it were, you've lost authority in the public mind because of things like this. You have lost the authority to tell people what is healthy and what is not, because you told them that was healthy, that donuts are the same as broccoli. You shouldn't shame people. And here, there's just as a reminder, the Democrats made kindergartners eat lunch outside on the concrete in masks, lowering masks between bites 6 feet apart in 2022. And New York Times reporters with kids in these schools stayed silent. But sure, RFK is the problem. Hey, man, they're right. They're right. You cannot now come and tell people everything is about science. Everything is based in the studies. When you handled, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin. When you're telling people, yes, you can go to restaurants if you take the mask and take the bite and put the mask back on. It was all this kabuki of COVID hygiene. You completely blew your credibility with the public. So now, of course, they're not going to listen to what you have to say. Whether you're right, whether you're wrong, you have lost the public's trust, and you for good reason.
Well, Max Blumenthal tweeted out something to that effect, that the number of lies told during and even coming right out of the pandemic are the reason why RFK was able to gain the kind of traction that he did.
Yes.
That was basically his point. And I think that point is obviously true, pretty much across the board when you look at the distrust in all of these institutions, especially public health as it pertains to this conversation. Yeah, I mean, this was not difficult to see coming. Now, what is difficult to see coming is whether or not he will get confirmed. Because this is a situation where you're looking at, a lot of, the pharma stocks tanked when he was named nominee. And, Trump is a very powerful figure in the Republican Party. So is pharmaceutical money. Pharmaceutical money is a very, very powerful player in both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the food industry, obviously. And that's where he has placed most of his focus and sort of emphasis on food. He's mentioned the vaccine stuff when it's been brought up to him, but he has not really led with that. And so that's a question. You talk about banning pharmaceutical advertising on TV. If that's going to be part of the program, I mean, you're going to be met with massive massive opposition on that front, including to a lot of Republican senators are going to be hearing a lot of phone calls from donors saying, you better not do this. Now, the question is Trump scarier to them than the pharmaceutical company? That's an open question at this point. Because of the landslide victory that he won, I think you could reasonably argue that these senators are going to be more afraid of Donald Trump than they are of Big Pharma. The second question downstream of that is how committed to RFK is Trump? Is Trump going to actually go to bat and try and whip the votes for him? Or, and this is a question kind of across the board, especially with the Tulsi pick, Gates is a loyalist to Trump, so I think he really wants Gates. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But are Tulsi and RFK these sort of gestures to a certain contingent of MAGA, the sort of, I won't say bipartisan, but the sort of amorphous sort of independent faction of MAGA. Right. Is he doing that to make it look like he tried to get them in the door? And if they go down, or if it looks like they're going to go down, how hard is he going to fight for them? In other words, is this more a gesture than an actual plan? To me, that's up in the air, and I think a lot of it depends on how fearful a lot of these swing votes in the Senate, who could go either way, how fearful are they of the pharmaceutical donors? Are they more afraid of them or of Trump?
Yeah, you have to remember the pharmaceutical companies, big agribusiness, food manufacturers, they have a stranglehold on the government. Even if he gets confirmed, will he be able to do what he's trying to do? You're talking about a level of corruption almost as profound as the military-industrial complex. That's why our ketchup is that way. And if you go to another country, they don't make it in a way that is going to make you put on 3 pounds because you put some ketchup on a hamburger. Can he really overcome that? You got to go against the agricultural farmers lobby. They get subsidies for the corn. That's a big part of why you have all this corn syrup and everything. That is an open question. You know, as you point out, that corruption is not particular to Democrats. It runs throughout the government.
Of course. Oh yeah. They bribe everybody.
Exactly. So even if they do confirm him, it's not clear he won't just be sabotaged at these agencies and not really able to do anything. But hey, man, of all of Trump's picks at this point, obviously I don't like RFK's views on Israel, but that has nothing to do with his job. So that really doesn't come into play here. This is probably the pick that I most would say, hell yeah, much better than what's there. Much better than what's there, even if I don't agree with him on everything, even in this area. Yes, I can't. Who else would you put there who might do something about a food supply and a drug supply that is so corrupted that at this point it's become a danger to the public?
It's his most pro-Palestine pick so far since he put RFK somewhere where he can't kill any of them.
Yes, it is. That's another reason I'm for it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right.
Keeping him away from the Department of Defense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. What do we got here? Okay, we got quite a few of these coming in. See, you don't hate us as much as you say you do. Benino, Thune said he would send the Senate on breaks so Trump's nominees get in. Cool, except for Rubio, the warmonger. Yeah, that is another question. Thune said he would send the Senate on breaks. This whole recess appointment scheme that is being rumored, I have looked into that a little bit. We were actually thinking maybe doing a segment about it. But that seems like if it were easy to do, that more presidents would do it.
Yep, sure.
I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen. Apparently, they need the House to get on board and do it. So yeah, that is a possibility. I don't know how likely it is. I couldn't really speak to that though. NG Hermit Keaton, here in Maine, we refer to Poland Spring as Stolen Spring. Bastards pumping us dry. Is that right? Did they drink your milkshake up there in Maine? Did Poland Spring? I'm sorry about that. I'd never heard that before. So I'll make a note of it.
Is that where they get it from?
Well, no, he's saying it because of the water. Yeah. Well, no, Poland Spring is from Maine. Yeah, obviously. But yeah, no, I never heard that before. So I apologize. I will switch water brands if that's true. Sparky might be like Rocky Marciano versus Joe Louis. Hope not. I'm cheering for Tyson. Yep. I mean, how could you not root for Tyson?
Of course, everyone's cheering for Tyson. Mm-hmm. I just hope it doesn't, wind up like Rocky IV. God forbid.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Maybe Trump can have the best of both worlds, says Sparky. In the new spirit of government efficiency, he can kill two birds with one stone by getting Tulsi to recite her intel briefing directly into Trump's Bono phone. There you go. Thank you, Sparky. Sparky says, sorry, I was such a sick bastard about Tulsi. Why? I couldn't help it. Don't tell her. I sort of know her. She's one of the most natural leaders I've ever known. She wasn't anti-Muslim back then. Oh, interesting. Sparky says it's possible that Tulsi's anti-Muslim change in attitude comes more from her Indian husband's influence than trying to please Trump. Is her husband Indian? I didn't know that guy was Indian.
Is he Indian?
The guy doesn't look Indian to me. Am I allowed to say that?
He identifies as Indian.
Yeah, it doesn't look Indian to me. She was raised a Hindu. A bit of both, perhaps. Yeah, maybe her husband is Indian. I'm not sure. It doesn't look Indian to me. Sparky, the Tulsi being a Russian stooge was completely made up out of thin air by Hillary. Thank you. Zekeness said, pardon me, there's a video of Diane coming out of a meeting with the CIA. She looked horrified. Sparky, troubling thing about Trump picking Hegseth isn't that he's another Christian Zionist eschatologist bent on accelerating the apocalypse, but it shows Trump still gets his intel by watching MSM fake news. Well, he wanted, remember when he wanted Judge Napolitano for the Supreme Court, which actually would have been probably would have been the most base pick there, He should have given it to him.
I'd be for that.
What's that?
I'd be for it.
Yeah, I'd be for it. That was one of his best ideas. Should have acted on it. I completely agree with RFK Jr., says Sparky, where there's a ludicrous amount of required vaccines which lead to lifelong maladies. Savage, who said that? Savage X Fatty's head looks like an ice cream cone. What was that? Was that Malcolm? Oh, that was another Rumble rant. Sorry. I thought you were just texting me that, Malcolm.
That would be strange.
That would be strange. Okay. Sparky says a giveaway that someone is not autistic is when they identify themselves as autistic. Autistic cattle chute designer Temple Grandin is the exception who proves the rule. Rut Dog says, search Lynchistan to find videos of RSS mobs attacking Muslims like Zionist football hooligans. The goal is to drive Muslims from India. Russell, this is a great rabbit hole for you. See DM on X. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not, because I don't have enough rabbit holes going right now.
Yes.
Sparky I need more.
Says 60 years ago, autism was still known as childhood schizophrenia. Before psychotranquilizers and Thorazine, Haldol, autistics were the people banging their head against the wall in the insane asylum. Thank you. DD117 says, according to Casey Means, the tobacco lobbyists moved to the food industry when they fell out of favor. All right. We will take some more of those.
That makes sense.
All right. We will take some more of those in due time. Right now, we will move on. All right, everybody, welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. Keaton Weiss and Russell Dobular sitting in for Jimmy through this week. So we got some news on the speech front, some news from the incoming Donald Trump administration. The Awesome Jew is on the story, everybody. The Awesome Jew, friend of show, Awesome Jew. Here is Donald Trump. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support. So we were going to go to the video right here. Here it is. Sorry. Oh, sorry. There it goes.
Here's what I will do to defeat anti-Semitism and defend our Jewish citizens in America. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support. Okay. Truth is, you don't have to do much after that. When you do that, it's going to work miracles. Please Sit down.
Miracles.
We will not subsidize the creation of terrorist sympathizers, and we're not going to do it certainly on American soil. We're not going to do it anywhere. Next, I will inform every educational institution in our land that if they permit violence, harassment, or threats against Jewish students, the schools will be held accountable for violations of the civil rights law. Very important. Jewish Americans must have equal protection under the law. They're going to get it. At the same time,
they don't have it now?
The administration will move swiftly to restore safety for Jewish students and Jewish people on American streets.
Okay, so apparently Jewish people don't have equal protection under the law anymore. No. That's new to me. I did not know that. David M. Friedman is impressed. This is leadership. Trump to universities, stamp out anti-Semitism or lose accreditation. So let's hear from the soon-to-be extinct U.S. Department of Education. That's one of his plans as well. Accreditation is a review of the quality of higher education institutions. If a university or college loses said accreditation, federal state grants are not available. Students cannot get federal or state loans. The degrees are not recognized. So, yeah, that pretty much... I mean, that puts them in the category of Trump University, basically, if they don't have those accreditations, need those accreditations. So David Icke, Trump selects Elise Stefanik for his UN ambassador. This is why he picked her. So, yeah, I mean, I got to say that is a pretty good way of connecting those dots, because what Trump is talking about here is the crackdown on campus speech, campus quote-unquote anti-Semitism, which of course means pro-Palestine, anti-genocide speech. Elise Stefanik is of course his UN ambassador pick, who had almost all of the viral moments when it came to grilling the heads of the Ivy League schools, who were then under fire, all of whom subsequently resigned their posts at Harvard, Columbia, and UPenn. Here she is, though, in Israel, letting you know who she is.
As long as I serve the American people.
I'm sorry the tech is giving me a hard time. I don't know why. Here we go.
As long as I serve the American people, I will defend George Washington's vision of religious pluralism and freedom. Today, this means crushing anti-Semitism at home and supplying the state of Israel with what it needs, when it needs it, without conditions, to achieve total victory in the face of evil. Chants of death to America are not hollow slogans. They are a promise that what happened here on October 7th could happen in the United States unless Hamas and its jihadist accomplices are eliminated. And it is the United States' high honor and high responsibility to support Israel's effort. I have been clear at home, and I will be clear here. There is no excuse for an American president to block aid to Israel, aid that was duly passed by the Congress. There is no excuse to ease sanctions on Iran, paying a $6 billion ransom to the world's leading state sponsor of terror, or to dither and hide while our friends fight for their lives. No excuse, full stop. That's why I'm proud to have sponsored or backed every measure to aid Israel that has come before the United States Congress. Every single one. And it's why for years I have been a leading proponent and partner to President Trump in his historic support for Israeli independence and security, including moving the U.S. Embassy to its rightful place in Jerusalem. Israel is indeed a miracle, an outpost of freedom, of Western values, of civilization, a striking example of human potential, the physical embodiment of Herzl's maxim, if you will it, it is no dream. It's the same founding ethos that we prize in America, the American dream.
There you go. So she has her talking points down. That's the same person who goes over to Israel, gives a speech like that, and then will browbeat university professors for essentially allowing their students to express points of view that challenge that just unbelievably sick perspective of this conflict. And what you see Trump there is really threatening to delegitimize any college that allows for that speech. Yep. That's basically what he says there. So, yeah. Yeah, that is. I'm sorry. This is a word, that some people think is overused when it comes to Donald Trump, and it is overused in liberal circles. But that is fascism. That is a fascist threat. We are going to delegitimize institutions that allow for freedom of speech.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little fucked up, but I thought America first means America first.
Right. Yeah.
I realize it means Israel first. It seems like he should run as Make Israel Great Again. I think he's mispronouncing Make Israel Great Again.
Yeah.
How is this a strong leader? How is this somebody who's going to come in and restore your speech? We had a chatter earlier saying, you realize Kamala Harris would have taken. Yes, we do. We do realize Kamala Harris. We covered a lot of Taibbi's reporting about that, about how Labor Together over in England was working with shadowy not-for-profits here to censor speech. Yeah, we covered all that. Of course they were a threat to speech. So is Trump. And in this area, what's going to happen to speech on universities now? We're going to have another Kent State under Trump? Are we going to have National Guard opening fire on protesters? What's going to happen now? Listen to what he's saying. He is talking about taking away the accreditation of universities that have protests, and they're completely accepting the Zionist formulation that protesting against Israel as a nation and the national policies of that nation is by definition anti-Semitic and an attack on Jews and Jewish students. How is that make America great again? How is that America first? Clearly, Donald Trump got $100 million from Miriam Adelson, and she is telling him what to do. I say that because, Donald Trump has strong opinions about this? Of course he doesn't. So where is all of this coming from? He's being paid. He's being paid. So anybody who comes to me and says, "Oh, look at Donald Trump, he's great," Sylvester Stallone goes to Mar-a-Lago, calls him the new George Washington. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. That's a clown show. We call it balls and strikes, man. Yeah, RFK. I definitely prefer that to the kinds of people who a Harris administration would have put in that position, who would have just continued in this deranged direction. We definitely need some course correction there. But to consider Donald Trump a strong leader when he clearly took a bribe to orient all of American foreign policy and some of its domestic policy in regards to the freedom of speech that a lot of MAGA people claim to value so much when it's being threatened by Democrats, when it's being threatened by liberals, to say this is a strong leader, that's absurd. Strong leaders don't take a bribe to go and defend a genocidal ethno-state.
Yeah, and as much as I, hate to make this sound even worse, potentially, than it already is, when you start defining speech as support for terrorism, you start getting into arguing that this kind of speech is material support for terrorism. Yeah, right. We have a First Amendment that makes it harder to charge people under that premise than, say, in the UK, where they're going after Richard Medhurst for basically expressing an opinion that they find sympathetic to terrorism. So yeah, we have a First Amendment that makes it harder for them to make that case. But once they get to a point where they consider certain speech material support for what they construe as terrorism, well, at that point, yeah, they can go after you. At that point, they can lock you up. And, in all these conversations about free speech, because there was a video that went viral that apparently Trump put out a while ago, but it recently went viral because he's talking about free speech online and on the internet. He made a specific carve out of a specific exception. One of the exceptions was if you support terrorism. Now, of course, anybody who actually supports violence, of course, that's not protected speech. We're not saying you should be allowed to advocate for violence or direct people to commit violence. Obviously, that's against the law, and we're not saying you should be allowed to do that online. But the point is, when he goes on stage and says stuff like this, that just shows you how liberally he is going to interpret support for terrorism. And that has implications beyond just what we do online or what you do or how you converse with people on social media, that can actually have legal implications.
Right.
I mean, that could actually be quite dangerous.
Right. And hey, I hope the more honest of MAGA movement people, of Trump supporters, are going to speak out about this the same way they spoke out about the Twitter files. I hope you're going to speak out and say, hey, that's un-American, because it is. What could be more un-American than that?
Of course. Absolutely. All right, let's take some more super chats. Some more Rumble rants, and then we got one more segment. Russ, do you want to take some of these, starting at...
Sure. Where am I starting?
Starting at Hamhawk 30. Hey, Russ. It's a few back. It's not that far up.
I'm probably... Oh, yeah, you did all these Sparkies.
Yeah. Yep.
Got it. All right. Hey, Russ. This Hamhawk 30. Hey, Russ, I was born late 69 also, and more than once asked my parents what they were thinking. Shows how much people hate Jake Paul that they'd happily root for the convicted rapist over him. Yeah, I mean, he did his time and all, but he's definitely been rehabilitated in the public mind. But Jake Paul does seem like a real asshole. That is very much, from what little I've seen of this whole thing, it is definitely like boxing through the idiocracy lens, that guy. G-Tard KGB. Hey, just wanted to say I love you guys. I just chatted to say I love you.
While we're paused for the chats, I just want to say a couple people in the chat did say that. And you're right. I misspoke if I said it that way. You are allowed to advocate violence in the abstract.
Yes.
As a tool of revolution. You're not allowed to direct a violent act at a specific person and command that act. Yes, I stand corrected.
I was going to say something, but you were on a roll.
Yeah, no, I misspoke there. I apologize.
Sparky 63. Any true rise in autism may come from the rise in Star Trek and comic book conventions and the like, enabling peculiar people to meet, get married, and have children with combined incompatible peculiarities. Of course, Sparky, you know the classic William Shatner SNL sketch. Have you ever kissed a girl?
Right.
Why don't you people get a life? Vienticus Prime. Realistically, the only difference you could say between Team Jackass and Team Peanut with regard to speech, you're making the same classic choice, atrocities domestically or atrocities abroad. No, it looks like the Trump administration is going for the hat trick.
Yeah.
They want the atrocities all across the board. Eric Rousseau. So we got out first woman president, President Miriam Adelson. You're right. Oh, yeah, she's running for. They should have to confirm her in the Senate.
Right.
TPS Report 13. Republicans thought it was just going to be a little blow until they heard Get's name announced and realized it was a Blumpkin after a Taco Bell binge. Bon appetit. Yeah, they're not happy about that, but I think they're going to express their displeasure by not confirming him. All right, so last piece of the night. All right, so we decided to go out with what we call a trans with a Smendrick, swinging it in the girls' bathroom. Now, this is a story that got lost in the shuffle because we had this whole election mishigas going on. But I really wanted to cover it before it's really passé. So a lot of people will come to you and tell you when you say, hey, it's insane to medicalize this ill-understood diagnosis, gender dysphoria in children, and take actions that are going to affect their health for the rest of their lives. They'll tell you, but all the studies show that it's effective, which first of all is not true. This is why study after study in Europe, where they have not-for-profit medicine, has led them to stop these treatments in children, except in clinical trials, and why in America they have been very resistant to even doing these studies because they're making a lot of money off of this. And even when they have studies, they don't want to publish them. So U.S. study on puberty blockers goes unpublished because of politics, doctor says. An influential doctor and advocate of adolescent gender treatments, said she had not published a long-awaited study of puberty-blocking drugs because of the charged American political environment. The doctor, Johanna Olson Kennedy, began the study in 2015 as part of a broader multi-million-dollar federal project on transgender youth. She and colleagues recruited 95 children from across the country and gave them puberty blockers, which stave off the permanent physical changes like breasts or a deepening voice that could exacerbate their gender distress known as dysphoria. The researchers followed the children for 2 years to see if the treatments improved their mental health. An older Dutch study had found that puberty blockers improved well-being, results that inspired clinics around the world to regularly prescribe the medications as part of what is now called gender-affirming care. But the American trial did not find a similar trend, Dr. Olson Kennedy said in a wide-ranging interview. Puberty blockers did not lead to mental health improvement, she said, most likely because the children were already doing well when the study began. Quote, they're in really good shape when they come in, and they're in really good shape after 2 years, said Dr. Olson Kennedy, who runs the country's largest youth gender clinic at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. That conclusion seemed to contradict an earlier description of the group, in which Dr. Olson Kennedy and her colleagues noted that 1/4 of the adolescents were depressed or suicidal before treatment. That doesn't sound like they were good when they came in. Full quarter of them depressed or suicidal. In the 9 years since the study was funded by the National Institutes of Health, and as medical care for this small group of adolescents became a searing issue in American politics, Dr. Olson Kennedy's team has not published the data. Asked why, she said the findings might fuel the kind of political attacks that have led to bans of the youth gender treatments in more than 20 states, one of which will soon be considered by the Supreme Court. Quote, I do not want our work to be weaponized, she said. It has to be exactly on point, clear, and concise, and that takes time. So yes, you're understanding this right. She doesn't want to release evidence that these treatments are ineffective because it might lead people to stop prescribing these treatments. That is literally what is happening here. So when people come to you and say, all the studies say this, first of all, they're wrong even in terms of published studies. But if you want to see why there are not more American studies showing you what other studies abroad have shown, that these treatments are not justified by the evidence, well, they have the evidence. They won't publish it. Now, you can't say that it's because this person is biased. This person runs the largest children's gender clinic in the country, is obviously very much in support of these treatments. Her own study showed this is not effective. She said that she intends to publish the data, but that the team had also been delayed because the NIH had cut some of the project's funding. She attributed that cut to politics, which the NIH denied. The broader project has received $9.7 million in government support to date. Dr. Olson Kennedy is one of the country's most vocal advocates of adolescent gender treatments and has served as an expert witness in many legal challenges to the state bans. She said she was concerned the study's results could be used in court to argue that we shouldn't use blockers because it doesn't impact them, referring to transgender adolescents. You mean like what your study showed? Other researchers, however, were alarmed by the idea of delaying results that would have immediate implications for families around the world. When asked in follow-up emails to clarify how the children could have good initial mental health when her preliminary findings had showed 1/4 of them struggling, Dr. Olson Kennedy said that in the interview, she was referring to data averages and that she was still analyzing the full data set. That's what we call the Israel exception. We're looking into it. Get back to us in a few years. Dr. Hilary Cass, a pediatrician who this year published an extensive review of youth gender services in England, said that the delays from the American and British research groups had led the public, the article also mentions a British study that was suppressed, had led the public to believe that puberty blockers improved mental health even though scant evidence backed up that conclusion. Quote, it's really important we get results out there so we understand whether it's helpful or not, and for whom, Dr. Cass said. Sounds reasonable enough. Her report found weak evidence for puberty blockers and noted some risks, including lags in bone growth and fertility loss in some patients. It prompted the National Health Service in England to stop prescribing the drugs outside of a new clinical trial, following similar pullbacks in several other European countries. So, of course, J.K. Rowling weighed in on this. Quote, we must not publish a study that says we're harming children, because people who say we're harming children will use the study as evidence that we're harming children, which might make it difficult for us to continue harming children. Well, you can see why she's a billion-dollar writer, because she summed that up very succinctly. Benjamin Ryan. In 2017, pediatric gender doctor Johanna Olson Kennedy applied for a change in her NIH grant that would lower the minimum age to put a child on cross-sex hormones from 13 to 8 years old. Today, the New York Times reported that she has been sitting on null results from her NIH-funded puberty blocker trial because of politics. This is someone so deranged that they felt it was appropriate to make that kind of a decision for an 8-year-old. You can't give, this is Prisha, you can't give informed consent when people are deciding not to inform you for political reasons. Exactly. Shellac, it's because she is starting with the conclusion that puberty blockers are good and is working backward from there. This is the opposite of science. Exactly. That's what you'll find throughout the literature in this whole area, at least on this side of the pond. So when somebody tells you, well, all the evidence supports it, point them to this. Point them to this article and explain to them they're not allowing the evidence to be published in this country, even though it's quickly becoming the conventional wisdom in European countries far to our left, including Sweden, which was the first country in the world to allow people to legally change their sex.
Well, yeah, I mean, also, obviously what exacerbates it in the United States is that you have a for-profit healthcare system where, people get, you don't think there are dollar signs in the eyes of people who have an opportunity to basically permanently medicalize someone at such a young age, because that's what you do, is you make them a permanent patient, which is just
exactly
money coming in, right? So I think that is, I think that is a good place to sort of center this if you're making an argument, in this realm, because, it's not phobic to be suspicious that a condition is being overdiagnosed, especially in a for-profit system. Like, that's all you're saying. You're saying it's being overdiagnosed by opportunistic doctors. That is not a judgment against trans people. It's just saying, hey,
of course
is this condition being overdiagnosed for, nefarious reasons by people with ulterior motives? That's all it is. It's a corruption question. It's not even so much a culture question. It's not a rendering of judgment on the lifestyle of another person. It's, hey, is this not a corruption issue, right, at this point?
Right. And we've almost exclusively talked about this when we've talked about this here and on our show in regards to children. Very much like what we were covering about the language around healthy at any size in the RFK segment. They're using the language of social justice to justify an intellectual framework that in the end is in service of profit. Yes, we've seen interviews with doctors. 6-month-olds know their gender. There's no scientific basis for that. There's no scientific basis to say that. They are pushing these ideas to justify medicalizing children because it's profitable. It's much more profitable than most studies show in the end they're going to be gays and lesbians if you just let it run its course. And people who it doesn't resolve that way, when they're adults, they can make that decision. That seems reasonable, but it's not very profitable.
Right. Indeed. All right. Is that everything? Do we have anything else, Malcolm? Any more super chats or Rumble rants there? Let's see. I'll give Malcolm a second to text me. Yes or no. If you have them, send them.
Yeah. Didn't a few come in?
Did a few come in? Let's see.
I think a few came in.
All right. Let's see. What do we got here? Here we go. Oh yeah. Here we go. Yes, we got a few in. Right.
Yeah.
Sparky says, any true rise in autism, right? Is that where we're at? Or did you get that one already?
No, I got it.
All right. So,
no, so there's just one more. Yeah.
Oh, this one just came in now, right? Yes.
Yep.
Miriam's late husband says Sparky barely gave Israel a thought until he married her, an Israeli model. Miriam got him into the whole Zionist activist thing. Was she also Mossad? I don't know.
Maybe. They're all
Remains to be
Mossad over
seen.
there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That remains to be seen. All right, folks, thank you very much. Thanks to the crew, Andrew, Malcolm, Chris, Jimmy, Steph, for the opportunity. I guess they're back next week.
Yep. They will be back on Monday. We're going to have a day off tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for being here. We appreciate you all. Yeah, we have a day off tomorrow, and then we're on the Do Dissident show on Sunday. Actually, aren't we doing something with Jimmy on Sunday? Isn't he speaking at
Yeah. We are going to be streaming at 2:00 Eastern time. We're going to be streaming on Rumble, our friend Kevin Augustine's show, The People versus Nature, which deals with a lot of the subjects we got into in the RFK segment about the pharmaceutical industry and vaccines. He is a brilliant puppeteer, one of the greats, honestly, one of the great puppeteers working on Earth today. And Jimmy is going to be doing a call-in talk back with him on Sunday, 2:00.
All righty. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate you all. We will see you next time.